Okay, that's recording now. How's your day going, Chris?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah,
And
been up
you?
to much? Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Had a very
Okay.
late start to the day. Didn't wake up till about noon.
Uh huh.
Hence why I was a little late setting up and
Okay.
okay. So do you want to tell people a little bit about yourself?
Okay, sure. My name is Chris Mann. I I just happen. Let me see. I like to. I have a particular way of debating, where I, try to change the other person's mind, and I've been debating with people a lot of my whole life. Basically, when I mean debate, I mean having a discussion where I'm just trying to change the person's mind on some issue. So it's not, I'm not trying to win anything or, you know. And so basically, when I came up with the idea for logical debate, what I call logical debate several years ago, it was basically an attempt to write, to set out a framework for how I go about having these discussions on an everyday basis. I'm just trying to put it into words so that other people can learn how to do what it is that I'm doing. Um, and
It can be difficult finding the right words and stuff like that.
right, and some things that are so obvious to me, it's not obvious to other people what it is that I'm doing. So trying to figure out what should I bother mentioning and what should I not have to bother mentioning, stuff like that. And so I'm just trying to work out the kinks in that. And yeah, basically, it all came together when I happened to read a coworker of mine happened to recommend Ayn Rand to me, and I had heard of her before, but I had never actually read her one of her books, uh, one of her big books. And so once I
Which
read
one
that,
did you read?
um,
Fountainhead?
it was Atlas Shrugged. He gave me a copy of that, and reading through it, I realized that there's a certain rhythm to it. There's a certain logic behind it, even though I don't agree with her conclusions. I can see what she's trying to get at, and she created a framework within the book by which you're supposed to judge all of the characters. And some of the characters are heroes, the heroes of the story, and some of the characters are the villains. And her description of what the villains are doing is basically the way I would summarize it is they're not following these their particular rules that she has set up. And so it's like, wait a minute, it's possible to follow those rules without being a libertarian per se. You can still be a Democrat and follow those rules. So I was like, okay, so let me specifically lay out a couple of the rules that she never explicitly stated, and then I can show that I can follow them and still be a liberal or a Democrat. And so, yeah, that's what finally got me to put it into words in this form. And so I think that if everyone were to follow these rules, um, discussions would more easily lead to people changing their minds and at least understanding why people actually disagree with them. So that's what I've been trying to do online for the years since then. But I don't really get much interaction from people, even if they don't. It's like my way of discussing things with them is somewhat uncomfortable to them, and they stop interacting with me, even though they haven't necessarily found any problems with what I actually said. And so that's why I've been going around online looking for people who outwardly say that they're, in favor of logic and reason and all of that, um, to try to see if I can get some engagement on this and show that my way of arguing is pretty effective, so that people will start to engage with me and take it seriously. And so that's about it.
Okay, and people can find those on your YouTube channel called Kristopher Mann, and it's a three-part video. Logical debate one, two, and three.
Well, yeah, I mean, let me see. I think it was. I need to update those videos, but The one that's labeled logical debate 3 is basically me just that was my latest update. Uh, it's not
It was like
necessarily
5 years ago, though.
yeah, it was a while ago. I need to update it a little bit, but the ideas contained within that number 3 is supposed to contain the entirety of it. I also have a write up of what I said in the video. That I basically yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, I think you listed 5 rules. The first 3 were about debate itself, and the second 2 were about morality.
They, yeah, no, that's pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the first thing that we should probably define is what you mean by logical debate, because the way I use the term is probably very different to the way you use the term.
Right. And so when I'm talking about logical debate, basically I'm just saying that you need to you're trying to change each participant should be trying to change the other's mind using statements that they believe are true and logical. And so when I use the word logical, I'm using it more. I tend to use it interchangeably with rational. Um, and so basically, what a philosopher would consider rational is what I would call logical. I don't make a distinction between those terms, but I understand that some people do. Um, and so, from a philosopher's position standpoint, they would probably say it's better to call it rational debate, because when I say rational, what I mean is I'm using it in a different way from the way I hear you and your co-hosts use it on your podcast and show. Um, and I spell that out in the second rule, where I say that you need to maintain that your views are rational until you change your mind, and change your mind only for rational reasons. And so, whenever you call a view rational, this rule number 2, says that you have to actually hold that position. So, rational is a quality that you use to describe your own position. And so, if you say that someone else's view is rational, you have to actually hold their view that you're calling that, so that you can't be in a position where um, I think the debate I think debates would tend to go in circles when you say a view is rational, but then you choose not to hold it. So it's basically a quality, like a positive quality that you use to describe your own position when you are capable of going into more details about why you hold the position. But for time limitations, you can't go into all the reasons immediately. So you just say that your own view is rational, and then if there is time, maybe you can go into the further reasoning to defend it.
Okay. One of the problems I would see with that is, what exactly do you mean by rational? Like, a flat earther believes that their arguments are rational and their conclusion is rational, and they maintain that their views are rational,
Hmm.
but I wouldn't call them rational.
Yeah,
But under your definition, it would seem that they would be rational because they believe that their reasons are rational.
no, it's not that I would call them rational either, because if you call the view rational, then you would have to hold it yourself. All right,
No, no,
so
no, that's not what I'm saying. Let me try and be a bit clearer here. You are saying that you should maintain your views are rational until someone changes your mind.
mhm.
Um, but if they keep maintaining their view is rational and you
Mhm.
don't manage to change their mind, I would say that they are not rational. Even if they believe they are and they maintain that they are and they have reasons to hold that position, they're just wrong in the fact that they're rational.
I understand you're using the word in a different way. I understand that.
Well, that's why I'm trying to get at what you mean by rational.
Um, yeah. So let me see. you're saying that even if a person, so when a person holds a view that you consider wrong, you would not necessarily call them rational, even though they have, their own justifications for their position. And and I understand that because you talk about that on your show a lot. You use rational in a different way. I'm just saying that within the framework that I'm laying out, I'm using it in a way such that basically people are expected to call their own views rational, and you're not expected to go out of your way to call other people's views rational unless you actually hold those other views. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that just seems like a tautology. It just seems like an expression of,
Your
I
conflict.
don't think you're rational. No, no, I don't think your views are rational, so I won't adopt them as rational. It doesn't really get us to what is meant by rational.
In philosophy, what is meant by rational in
No, no,
philosophy
no, no,
is
no.
not.
In the way that you use it, it doesn't tell me how you're using it beyond whether or not we agree with somebody. But whether or not we agree with somebody might not necessarily mean that our view is rational or their view is rational. Even if we maintain that our view is rational, it might not be. So, how do you distinguish between somebody who just believes that their views are rational and the view being rational?
See, when you ended that sentence there with rational, you didn't say according to whom.
Well, no, rationality isn't a subjective thing, though, is it? You believing that the earth is flat doesn't make it rational that the earth is flat. It doesn't make the belief itself rational.
To whom?
Well, just in general. What is rationality? It's more, if you're using the term just to describe your own views, like my views are logical, there there is some basis in the term logical or rational that it refers to some quality of the argument. Um, so if you say my view is rational, what exactly are you saying?
All
Beyond
right,
I believe my view is rational.
all right, all right. So basically, I'm saying that I believe my view. Hold on, I should have pulled this up earlier, but
Take your time. I'm just enjoying the
that's
discussion,
fine.
and it's just a nice, easy afternoon.
Yeah,
I'm
let
not
me
meaning
pull
to
up
put
the
you on the
specific.
spot or anything
No,
like that.
there's no problem. This I did want to go through this stuff. Um, all right, so basically, the idea is um, your view is rational. If you're willing to say that it's rational, you're willing to have yourself to be quoted as saying that it's rational, and you're able to support your views with further argumentation. Uh, you know, or you have further reasoning. You can. I don't know how else to.
No, I get what you're saying. What you're saying is that if you believe your views are rational,
Hmm.
then you can call your views rational.
Right.
Um, but that's just sort of like, I believe I can fly, so that's making a statement that you think you can fly, or something like that. But the term flying would refer to a specific kind of property within the world. And that would be that you could levitate yourself, lift yourself off the ground. Um,
Okay.
it's so when you say my view is rational, there must be some content within that statement that refers to something more than I believe I am this thing. What is this thing that is being described?
Um. Okay. Even in that example that you gave, you were assuming that when a person says, that they can fly, and they think that that view is rational. First of all, you would have to be assuming what their definition of fly is, because it could be that they
Well,
mean
I've
when you.
just given you the definition.
All right, that's
Um,
fine. That's fine.
I
Let me
can lift
just.
myself off the ground.
All right,
I can lift myself off the ground and soar like a bird, say.
and if the person is saying that that is a rational view, right? But in that case, I would disagree with that person, right? And I would explain why I disagree with them, and I would expect them to be able to give arguments for um, why they think that they can do that, and why they would not be able to demonstrate it at the moment or whatever. Um, so I have it pulled up a little, my write up right here. So let me go through this real quick. Your views are defined as logical in your opinion. If you're willing to say that they are logical in your opinion, you're willing to be quoted as saying they are logical in your opinion, and you can think of logical reasons for your views that contain no contradictions, no inconsistencies, or logical fallacies that you can find. All right? And so that's basically what I mean. Like, their views have reasons behind them that you that they don't think are in contradiction with each other. They're all consistent and coherent with each other. That's the underlying quality that I'm getting at when I call
Okay,
my view.
that does kind of get us somewhere. So logic is when an argument is consistent within itself and coherent to itself and doesn't contain contradictions.
Right,
Would that be right?
right.
Okay. But now let's separate the the person believing that their views don't contain contradictions from their views containing contradictions. So if two people don't believe an argument contains contradictions, does that mean that the argument does not contain contradictions?
Well, you have to say according to whom. I mean, there's always going to be with respect
Well, that's
to
what
the
I'm getting
person
at.
listening, to the person watching or listening to the discussion. All right. So if there are
Yeah,
two
but
people,
again, does somebody not believing an argument contains contradictions? Like if I said to you, I am a human that contains no DNA, or water is both H2O and not H2O. Now, if I believe that those weren't contradictory, according to your statement, then my belief would be logical because I don't believe that they contain contradictions. But it clearly contains contradictions.
according to other people, yes.
No, no, yeah, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. Even if they believe that two don't contradict each other, those are contradictory statements. Even without somebody else making the judgment, that person is just wrong for saying that they contain no contradictions. Their belief is a false belief.
Okay, so I think that's going to be a fundamental disagreement or a fundamental conflict between us. Because it seems like even though I'm specifically saying, like, trying to, I'm trying to make it clear that the person who sees that there is a contradiction is themselves a person who, according to whom there's going to be a contradiction. You're trying to remove that observer completely and just say, just in general, there is a contradiction, according to no one in particular. And I'm trying to always attach it to a person who holds the view that there is a contradiction. So I'm always keeping in mind who's watching the discussion. And you want to remove that observer. It seems like you want to remove that observer from my discussion.
Well, if you think of your idea that a logical argument or logical statement is one that is coherent to itself, consistent to itself, and contains no logical contradictions, that removes the observer.
I've always said according to the
Yeah,
okay,
but
okay, let's
it doesn't matter that you say according to the person. The statement that logic must be this removes the observer. So even if the observer does not see logical contradictions, according to that definition, there is still logical inconsistency.
your view.
This is
This is what
why definitions are important. Um, sorry.
may I?
Um, yeah,
All right,
yeah,
so I'm sorry. Are you you cut out for a
yeah,
second?
sorry.
Okay. Let me say this again. Let me try this again. So the way I was defining logical, you asked me how I was defining logical in my framework. All right, and in my framework of logical debate, okay, what I'm saying is your views are defined as logical in your position. If you are willing to say they are logical in your position, you are willing to be quoted as saying they are logical in your position, in your opinion, I mean, and you can think of logical reasons for your views that contain no contradictions or inconsistencies or logical fallacies that you can find. All right, if you meet those criteria, then I would say that you can call your view logical. That's all I was getting at with that. Okay. Now other
Yeah,
people
I
will
understand that.
disagree. Other people will disagree when you say that your view is logical and has no internal contradictions. Other people outside of you can disagree with you and say, "Hey, your view contains logical fallacies." According to the this second person, your view, they're going to say that your view contains logical inconsistencies and is therefore illogical in their view. Okay, so that's what I'm getting at. Do you understand?
Yeah, I understand. What you're saying is that the truth of whether something is logical,
According to whom?
well, it doesn't, yeah, it doesn't really matter. You're saying that the truth of whether something is logical, that property comes from whether or not the person believes that it's logical. Do you understand what I'm saying?
You're taking. You won't answer according to whom. That's fundamental to the
Well,
framework you're
yeah,
using.
that's what I've just said. Okay. Um, you're saying that a view is logical if a person believes it is logical. If a person states that their view is logical, that makes it logical.
I'm explicitly not saying that. They can call themselves logical if they are willing to say that it is logical, that are willing to be quoted as saying it's logical, and that they have further, justifications or their reasoning doesn't contain inconsistencies in their view. Then that's when I would expect the person to call their own view logical. Now, I would not call that logical from my view if I disagree with it because I think there might be inconsistencies. When I listen to them and I see what might be a logical fallacy, I'm not going to call that logical in my opinion. It's not going to be logical in my opinion, okay? But it'll be logical in their opinion until I get a chance to change their or try to change their mind.
Okay. But again, you're making it all very subjective. You're making it so that if a person believes their view is logical, this is what your argument entails. Okay. If a person believes that their view is logical and they're willing to say it's logical, then according to them, it is logical.
Yes.
Now, yeah. Um, but does that make the statement logical?
According to me,
You're no. Does that make the statement logical? Logic is a property of things. It's a property of arguments. So you saying when you say an argument is logical if it contains no inconsistencies, no incoherences, and is consistent within itself. Now, if a person believes all those things about their arguments, they're going to believe that they are logical arguments. And if you see that they're not, you're going to believe that they're illogical. Okay. That's a statement of how something justifies a belief. But what actually justifies it being logical? And before I carry on, Philip's asking if you'd mind if he asked you a question.
no problem.
Okay, yeah, I think I have maybe something that can move the discussion a bit further. Like when you ask people according to whom, right? I think what you could say is, for instance, according to like a framework of logic, like for instance, classical logic, right? It's like saying according to the rules of math in a way, because here's the thing: like there are frameworks of logic, right? There are rules, certain rules in logic, fundamentals rules in logic, like non-contradiction and all these things. And therefore, like when you say that something is logical or inconsistent or something like that, you can appeal to that rule set independent of whether or not someone believes that being logical or that not being logical, something like that. Right. So if you and I agree that, like, for example, we are talking within the framework of classical logic, something can be like inconsistent, not according to me, but according to the rules that we both agreed on. In the same way that you could say, like, if we agree what like the plus operator does in math, then 2 plus 2 equals 4 and not 5, because of the rules that we agreed on
Okay,
beforehand. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying.
So does that answer your question in a way with regards to like according to whom, when you ask if something is like inconsistent or illogical?
That's okay. So even in that example, you're you're specifying that the two people would have agreed on that rule set, right?
Yeah, I mean, but
They've
yeah,
agreed
sure.
to have a discussion within that framework of those specific rules.
Yeah, but I mean, like when you talk about logic, at least usually you're talking about like a certain framework of logic, right? So like at least usually when you say that, like something like classical logic or something like that is what you're taking your argument into consideration from. Like that's what your basis is usually, like something, the rules of deductive logic and stuff like that. At least that's my understanding of it. I am not sure
All
exactly.
right, so um, I'm not speaking in terms of philosophical, at the academic meaning of logic and
Okay.
the specific classical rules of logic that you're talking about. Um, I'm I simply all I was doing was laying out how I was using the word in logical debate that I came up with. I'm just using it
Hmm.
in my particular way. But I understand that philosophers have a different set of definitions of what counts as logical, and so yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
So
they can mesh. I mean, it's perfectly compatible. It's just that I'm not referencing formal logic when I'm speaking off the cuff. You know,
hmm so
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 but I
you're
can
talking
understand.
about. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just saying that I can understand formal logic if both of the participants in the debate want to say, hey, let's specify that we're going to be talking about formal logic, then that's fine. So according to them, they're going to have a set of statements that they're willing to say that they're both willing to agree are logical because they both hold those positions. They're both willing to be quoted as saying they hold those positions, and they can further back those positions up, and they think they contain no fallacies and inconsistencies.
Yeah, I guess the thing I'm sort of confused about at this point, because you said as well that it is like, and Dave, like I don't want to hijack your conversation, so
No, no,
maybe
no,
I'm going way too much, so maybe I just shut up and you continue.
no, no,
I'm
no,
not
no.
sure.
Ask your question. I'm finding it interesting myself.
Yeah, it's more like you said that it is rational, you use it like a synonym of rational,
Yeah.
right? But then when you define it, you say, if someone believes it to be rational, if someone is willing to be quoted on that, and then the third one is if it is sort of consistent and it doesn't contain fallacies. So I guess my question would be about that third point, because it seems to be referencing something else. Like, for example, what would be considered a fallacy, or what would be an inconsistency? Because I understand these terms like in what I would call like a classical understanding of logic. For example, P and not P, holding both would be like a contradiction, so it would be an inconsistent view. But if you say that, well, that's not what I mean by logic, and it's something else that I mean by logic that is not like this understanding that I have, then I guess my question would be, well, what is that? Like, what is a fallacy in that view?
You're I think you're simply overthinking what I'm trying to get across. You you're more familiar if you're more familiar with classical logic and the formal logic, that's fine. It fits perfectly within the structure I've laid out. Just like you said, that third part, it seems like it's referencing formal logic or formal fallacies and all of that.
Yeah.
That's exactly fine. That's fine. Okay, that's all there is to it.
Yeah, okay, but I guess I'm asking what it means to you then, right? Because you said that it's not the same as your usage in a way. At least
The
that's my
part
understanding.
the
Maybe I'm
two
just
parts that come before it. The two parts that come
yeah,
before it.
yeah.
That's what I'm getting at.
Okay,
So
so
in
you're
classical philosophy or formal logic, whatever,
mhm.
they don't include those two parts where where you call your own view logic, or you call your own view rational, and you're willing to be quoted as saying that. And they don't also include the rule that says that you can only call your view rational if you actually hold the view. So that's
That
all I'm adding to it.
that's kind of a given, though. That if you are going to be arguing that your views are rational, that entails you believing that they're rational and claiming that they're rational. There's a sort of entailment in the actual axiom that it's starting from.
All right, and that's why
So they are included.
I'm a little surprised that we're still um, hung up on this. If it, yeah, there's nothing. I, I think we should
The,
be able
the
to
reason we're
agree.
hung up
Okay.
is because there's, let me see, how can I put it? When you're claiming that believing a view is logical, and stating a view is logical, and believing that it doesn't contain these contradictions, then it is logical in your view. And the other person claiming that their view is logical, and the point is to change your mind. Within that rule set, you then have two people who's both claim that their views are logical. Okay, and the point is to debate whether they are logical. That's part of your system, isn't it? So the problem then becomes you have two people both believing that their views are logical. I believe it's rational to believe that the Earth is round. A flat earther believes that it's rational to believe that it's flat. Now, we both claim that our beliefs are rational. They believe that their views do not contain any contradictions. And even if you introduce them to satellite imaging, you know, pictures from satellites and stuff that we've sent out, they just claim that they're doctored photos, they're CGI, that kind of thing. So they still believe that their view is rational. So there needs to be, if you're going to argue the logic of something, there needs to be a set of axioms. There needs to be a set of beginning points to show whether or not something is logical and rational, which is why I was mentioning the inconsistency, incoherence, and, it being consistent to its own argument and framework. If a person believes all that, does that make it true that those things are those things?
Um. Okay. So if I understand you correctly, um, so I was with you, like with the flat when you're
See,
talking with a flat earther. Yes, I would expect them to believe that their views are rational and that they can back up their arguments without and show that they are without contradiction. Um, I would expect them to believe that their views are without contradiction. And so when you show them satellite images and they say, "Oh, those images are doctored," or whatever, then they would have to actually show in what way they were doctored, or they probably have some grand conspiracy theory. And so then your next step, I mean, either they need to, you would ask them to substantiate their conspiracy theory, or you would prove that the photos are not doctored, or you know, you you have different options available to you. But if they defend their position by saying that the images are doctored, That's not enough for you to claim that they are contradicting themselves. You would have to actually show that how exactly their conspiracy theory is in conflict with another one of their views in order to show that they're contradicting themselves. That's where I would go with it.
Okay. But it's contradictory to the body of knowledge that we have about the Earth. So their view does contain a contradiction, even if it's not an internal contradiction. It contradicts what we actually have knowledge of. So there is a contradiction there still.
That's fine. Then you can debate.
Okay. So what I'm trying to get at is, does believing a view is logical make it logical, make it rational? This is why I'm hung up on terms like logic and rational, because I don't believe that somebody believing something is rational gives it the property of rationality.
Again, you are removing the according to whom part. You're saying according to the body of knowledge that we have. But even once you say we, you're including yourself in we. All right? So a person who does not believe in that body of knowledge that the majority of philosophers believe,
But this isn't
they,
philosophers, this is physicists. This is astrophysicists. It's actually people that do the science.
all right, so okay. So what would you prefer? What word would you prefer I use as an adjective to describe the positive quality that I believe my own views contain? If I'm not, if you're not going to allow me
Yeah,
to
no,
call
no,
them
no.
rational or
I'm not.
logical.
I'm not. No, 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 no. That's not what I'm disputing. Um, I agree with you that when somebody says that their views are rational, that entails them saying that they believe that they're rational. It logically follows, is what I'm saying. It automatically follows that if somebody says that they think the Earth is flat, it means that they believe the Earth is flat. Yeah, and if they believe that their views are rational because they hold them, it's what they believe to be the case. So therefore, they believe that is rational. They believe that that is the logical outcome of their views. Does that make sense?
I'm with you so far, but you haven't. One thing I just caught right there is that you think it entails. There's entailment when a person says, um, first of all, you on your show often as you often make decisions with Joe about whether or not a person is rational or whether or not a view is rationally held, even though you yourself don't hold that specific view, and you
Yeah.
so
Let
that so
me
it's not
kind of.
necessarily entailed the way you like to use the word.
Yeah, it still is. Um, okay. So if all the information that you have leads you to that view, and you hold no information that counters that, then you can say that your view is rationally held. You have epistemic justifications for holding that view because you don't know any different. So you are as rational as you can be in that situation. Being as rational as you can be in a particular situation does not automatically entail that the position itself is a rational position.
Okay.
And I think with your statement here, I believe X is logical. I'm willing to claim X is logical. Therefore, X is logical for me. I agree with that part. Yeah. All that is entailed from them claiming X is the case. But once introduced to new information that counters it, n- not accepting it doesn't mean that your view is still rational. It means that your view is now irrationally held. Just because you come up with arguments to discount that, it it doesn't mean that your epistemic justification is still rational.
All right, and I understand that that's how you are using the words. I understand. I've heard you. Um, I'm just trying to come up with a different way of using the words. All I want you to do is understand what I mean when I'm using the words. That's
Yeah,
it.
I do understand. You asked for critiques on your position, and this is some of the problems I see with it. Do you know what the fallacy of equivocation is?
Using a word two different ways with two different senses, switching between them.
Yeah, it's using a term vaguely, um, and one that say you use in multiple ways. Think of an argument like, "I'm feeling blue. The sky is blue. Therefore, I am the sky."
Okay.
That sort of follows in a valid structure, doesn't it? But there's an equivocation going on because the word um, it has different meanings. It's vaguely defined. You know, once you actually look at the structure of how it's defined, you see that there is a fallacy of equivocation going on there, leading to a false conclusion. And when you use logical and rational in a vague way, just logic is whatever you believe your view is. There's an equivocation there that goes on because logic isn't that generally.
According
Logic
to
is, like you say, inconsistencies, incoherences, and an argument being inconsistent with itself.
okay, like I said, in my framework, there's no you can still participate in these in the kinds of debates that I'm proposing. I'm not excluding you. When I'm trying to exclude with these
Well,
rules, hold on. When I'm trying to exclude with these rules are people who go around saying stuff like, well, you know, my position is irrational, but here's why you should agree with me anyway. And stuff like that. So there are people out there who say that their own view is illogical or irrational, and yet they'll try to get other people to hold the view. That's what I'm trying to leave
can
out
you
of
give
this kind
me
of
an example?
discussion.
Can you give me an example of somebody who claims that their view is irrational but
Not off the
thinks that
top of my head. Not off the top of my head. I can't point to a specific person, but that's it. Those are the kinds of people who like when you're talking about a your opinions of a movie, whether you think a movie is good or not, right? And you might see a person starting off by saying, "Oh, yeah, I know it doesn't make any sense, but I like this movie because of this, this, and this." Stuff like that. That's what I'm trying to get rid of. I'm trying to say, wait a minute. You just gave reasons for why you like this movie. So why would you say that that doesn't make sense in your view? In your view, that should make sense for you to like that movie. So stuff like that. I want people to start the debate. I want them to start the discussion having confidence or expressing confidence in their ability to back up their positions.
okay. Um, I think most people would, even those people who say, "I know it's not rational, um, but I really enjoyed the Texas Chainsaw Massacre." Um, Debates like that wouldn't really be debates in the same sort of sense that you talk about when you talk about moral debate, scientific debate, and thingy. Those are expressions of opinions. So you might say, well, I know it might seem irrational to you that I enjoy Frozen as a 50-year-old man, but I enjoy it.
And it's rational
The-
to you,
the-
right?
Well, yeah, most people would be inferring that when they say, I know it's not rational,
Yeah.
because what they're inferring is that the other person might not believe it's rational. But when it comes to, say, preferences for films, food, the only rationality behind that is that you enjoy it. They're not really things concerned with rationality and logic itself.
No, I was just giving an example there. The same thing applies with other topics that are not so subjective. So when you're talking about um, like a scientific position, a position that you might hold on some scientific issue, if you start off by saying, yeah, I know it's not rational, but I happen to think that light is made up of this, and this, then I would say, wait a minute now. I want you to be able to, I mean, if you have your reasons for believing that, I want you to be able to back that up with uh, reasoning without any contradictions or inconsistencies. So I don't want you to call your own view irrational if you believe you actually can back up your reasoning. So I would want, so in other words, I'm just trying to get them to start off with the rules, the way I define the rules, the words right here. I'm just trying to get people to start off on the right foot by expressing that they can back up their arguments with reasoning.
Okay, perhaps then, just a suggestion, rather than use the term logical when you write that rule,
Hmm.
use something like I have reasoning. Because when you use the term logical, for most people, you would be inferring a particular kind of thought. So that's something I would suggest to make that rule less ambiguous.
Well, I would say that the way I'm using the word is very common among people who do not study philosophy. And so yeah, when I'm speaking with you, if it's going to cause you confusion by what I no, if you're getting confused by what I mean by the word as opposed to what the majority of philosophers mean when they use the word, then I'm perfectly fine. If
That's what I'm trying to pin down.
I
When you use the term logic and you say the view contains consistency, coherency, that kind of stuff isn't contradictory, you are describing logic as most philosophers would use it in terms of classical logic.
okay,
So you are describing the same thing.
Yeah,
Most
that's what I was.
Sorry, Philip.
No, yeah, that's what I was like. I meant before. Like you have these three conditions, and the third one seems to be consistent with what even philosophers would call sort of logical. So I guess that was why I was confused about you saying, well, I don't think it's the same, or I don't think I use it in the same way. But you seem to have within those three parameters, you seem to have one that is sort of understood in those terms, unless you have a different understanding of what inconsistency means or what fallacy means. But these terms, like again,
okay,
that's why I was confused.
okay. Again, it's perfectly fine. I don't see why you think that simply because my definition of logical includes as one of the three parts a part that is pretty much identical to what most philosophers mean, why you think that that then must mean that there's some issue, there's some conflict here. It's perfectly compatible. It's included in there, so
Yeah,
it's
no,
compatible. You can use it to mean what you want to mean as
yeah, I
long as
guess.
all I'm trying to say is that I want you to actually use logical or rational to indicate that you can back up your reasoning. And one more thing I wanted to say is, like Dave, you suggested I use a different word instead of logical, and for the purposes of our conversation, I'm perfectly willing to say having justifications or having reasoning to back this up. I'm perfectly fine to switch that out if that'll help with this conversation and us understanding each other. So that's why I was asking you if you don't think I should use the word rational or logical, what word should I use? And if your suggestion is having justifications, then yeah, for the purposes of this conversation, let's pretend I'm calling it having justifications debate or
It's
debate.
not just for our conversation, though. It's if you want your system to be as approachable as possible to as many people as possible, I would change those words out. That's the words I would use to make it more global and more accessible, and you will have less people arguing with you over how you're using these words, um, and allow you to get to the conversation quicker about what you're attempting to say there.
Okay, I
Because
under.
you're using a word that has a sort of specific meaning. Even within, say, the atheist community, when people say logic, they're speaking about a particular form of reasoning. They're not just saying, well, it's logical. It's a word that has content.
I understand what you're talking about. I simply have a disagreement about how useful. Um, we just have a disagreement on that part about which would be easier for me to use outside of this conversation. Because I think that my usage is more closer to how normal non-philosophers speak. And so we're just going to have that disagreement. But for the purposes of this conversation, let's just pretend that every time I say logical or rational in this in logical debate, I'm simply saying having rational reasoning or justifications. And let's move on. I mean, if you had any other objections to the framework I'm putting forward, I would like to hear.
Well, that's not specifically part of the framework itself. Like, I wouldn't consider that part of a framework of debate. That would just be reasons to enter a debate rather than the actual framework of the debate itself. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I understand.
Oops, sorry, Philip.
No, I just wanted to quickly reply to what you were saying before, in the sense that you were saying something like you don't see why I would have issues with your definition because the way you use it includes the way like I might use it and something like that. And you're right? That by itself is not problematic. Um, I have like another thing that I might get into, like why I find it problematic that Dave was getting at a bit earlier. But like the main thing that I was trying to say is simply that I don't understand why you say that it's not the same, but then you have like within that, within your understanding, what I would say is the thing. So I say
Okay,
I
can
use
I?
logical I understand logical as in a philosophical sense, and you say, well, I don't understand logical in a philosophical sense, but then you say you use words that within your own definition that would be defined within the philosophical sense. So I guess I take issue with the distinction that you're making there, that your understanding that you are using it in a different way, but you seem to be using concepts that are used in the way that I would understand it. So I don't understand why you're making the distinction. That's what I'm trying to get at.
All right, I would like to try to share my screen here,
It's sharing here.
so you can see
Yes.
what I have typed here.
Uh, yeah,
Yes.
I've just blown it up for the recording so other people can see as well.
All right. So, Philip, it seems to me that, all right, so here is where I'm defining how I was using logical in your position, in your opinion. All right. And it contains three main parts, right? And let me see. Here is where it's saying that, it basically includes formal logic, the way a philosopher would think of it. All right. So it's included in here. All right. All I'm saying is that when those philosophers want to, when they want to enter into logical debate, all I'm saying is that they are willing to be quoted as saying that their views are logical or rational. All right. Now you may believe that that's entailed, but in my experience, there are people who would not necessarily be willing to be quoted as saying that a particular position they hold is logical or rational. And so that's all I'm trying to get at. So if this part, if you believe that this part is completely like the same as formal logic, then that's fine, okay? And then all I'm asking you to do on top of that is be willing to say that your view is logical and be willing to be quoted as saying that in public. That's all I'm adding on top of it. So there is a difference in the way I'm using the word logical here, but it's just in that small additional part to formal logic that I'm adding on there, okay? And again, for Dave, like every time I say the word logical here, just pretend that I'm saying that, like having just justifications. Yeah. So that's it.
Okay, yeah, I guess I understand that the way you see the distinction is simply like you take what I understand as logical and then you add two things on top of it. And I would say like the first one that you're willing to say that I would think that that is an entailment. The thing unquoted, I guess personally I can see that people might not be like might not want to be quoted on something, but that's maybe merely because they don't feel as sure of the views that they're currently trying to discuss, and so they're like, no, yeah, I'm willing to enter this discussion, but I don't want to sort of. It's not something that I hold strongly or something. I just want to sort of discuss it or something. So that's my why someone might not want to be quoted on something. That's at least the first thing that comes to the top of my head. But yeah, okay, I understand like how you are now sort of assembling the thing. I guess the additional thing that I wanted to ask or rather discuss is because you are saying that something is logical in your opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're defining sort of three, like logical, but also in your opinion. So I guess would you define something as logical in the same way as you would define logical in your opinion, or like is it the same? Because
I'm
if it is, then I have a couple of issues.
When I say in your opinion, I'm just making it clear who gets to say what is logical. Because if it's not logical in your opinion, then I don't want you to call it logical. Okay? If it's a view that you don't actually hold, I don't want you to call it logical. Um,
Okay.
because
Okay, but
this would, I think, reduce confusion and it. Uh, uh, Go ahead.
sorry. If you think of something like the Kalam, I don't believe what comes after the Kalam, but I would think that the Kalam is a logical argument. Um, and if a person believes that it's not logical, they're obviously going to claim it's not logical. That's why I'm saying part of this. If you want this wording to be a bit better, you could probably trim it down a little. Um, it's kind of muddily defined. So rather than say something like your views are defined as logical in your opinion, um, put something like your views are defined as true in your opinion, because you're sort of saying the same thing with less muddy wording.
Where would the
I guess
having
the
logical reasons come into that? I mean,
Because by saying that you believe that they're true, you're saying that you believe that it's those opinions are logical. Most people don't ascribe to opinions that are true but illogical. Or no, that's the wrong way to put it. Most people wouldn't ascribe their views that are true to being illogical. They wouldn't think that my view is illogical, so therefore it's true. They believe it's true because they think that their views are logical.
all right. Again, me and you, Dave, are going to have a difference of opinion when it comes to. Um,
Oops, sorry. Hang on, I'll just close the stream.
Hold on a second. All right. So you and I are going to have a long-lasting disagreement on my use of the word logical, and I understand that. That's why I would like us to come to an agreement on what word we can use when we are discussing things with each other, so that we can have as little miscommunication as possible. And so, like, um, I'm trying to make a distinction between something being true and something being logical, in my opinion. And I need another word. Okay, so we both agree on what counts, what is meant by true. But when I say logical, you're hearing something else. You want to use that word specifically for formal logic. You want to have that reserved for formal logic. So what word, what adjective can we like make up a new word called slogical? Okay, so so when I'm talking about slogic, I'm talking about the definitions, the three-part definition that I laid out in my document here. Okay. So logic includes formal logic, or what you would call logic. Okay. So when I say that my view is logical, I want you to understand that am I'm communicating to you that I have confidence in my ability to back up my views with additional reasoning if we had time to go through them. Okay? So that's what I mean by logic. Okay? So if we were to use the word logic, would that get around this issue that you're having with it?
Yes and no. I mean, you could say that somebody like Wilfred Hodges, who argues the other 2 points as well, that the collection of statements that you hold as part of your belief must all be internally consistent to be logical. So you're still using the word as logicians would use it in some sense. But let's just move past this then. But what I'm saying is that most people who come to a debate, at least a debate where they're trying to discuss a view, come to some kind of harmonious decision, change another person's mind, they will be coming to that anyway with the belief that their views are logical and rational. That's why they would be debating it.
Okay.
I guess the last thing that I would want to say with when it comes to logical is the way I see the issue is that if what determines what's logical is those three things, then you can never disagree about what is logical.
Do you believe the
Because
Earth is flat?
no, I don't.
Do you believe
But
that
if sorry, go ahead.
do you believe that the view that the Earth is flat is a logical or a logical position?
If I do, if logical means that it is say it has no inconsistencies and I'm willing to be quoted on that and I'm willing to say it, then it is logical by your definition.
You just said you don't believe the Earth is flat.
No,
Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry,
I
Phil.
don't. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I don't believe the Earth is flat.
Okay, so according to that, then you don't believe the view is logical.
Yeah, but you said that something is logical if someone believes it believes that it has no inconsistency and stuff like that, holds it. Is willing to say it and is willing to be quoted on it. So it is logical if there is someone that it believes that there are no inconsistencies in it and is willing to say it and is willing to be quoted on that. If those three conditions are true, then it is logical, isn't
If
it?
I were talking to a flat earther, I would expect them to believe their own view is logical, okay? And so then I would
Okay.
have the discussion with them because I would expect that they would come with their evidence or whatever. You could get into a long debate like like they had on YouTube, Um, but imagine now a flat earther who is not willing to debate the issue, who does not want to change other people's minds. Now imagine that person coming on to a YouTube debate with a round earther, right? And then the round earther says, "So you believe the earth is flat?" And the flat earther says, "Yes." And then the round earther says, "Okay, so what is your reasoning?" And the flat earther says, "Well, I have my own personal reasons. I don't need to tell you what they are, you know?" In that situation, that a debate cannot go forward in that kind of situation. That's why in these rules that I laid out, I'm specifically narrowing the field to the kinds of debates where progress can be made, where both participants need to come to the table being able to explain their reasoning for their views.
Okay, I see that. Yeah, but I still think that, like as you said, there is a distinction whether or not you believe something to be logical and whether or not it is logical. That seems to be an implication because if you define something that, like, if you say something is logical if there's someone that is willing to be quoted on it, is willing to say that it is true or that it is logical and believes that there are no inconsistencies in this position or something like that, then it seems to me that this, by definition, if there is at least someone that has all these three characteristics, then the view is logical, because there is someone who believes it in that sense.
According to that person, yes, their view is logical in their
Yeah,
opinion.
but see, this is the issue. This is the issue, because if you say that it is like if you define logical as, okay, there has to be at least one person that is willing to be quoted on it, is saying that it is true and believes that there are no inconsistencies, then that position, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, what is the definition of logical? Only logical, like something is logical if.
Again, it seems like now you are trying to remove the observer from the discussion. I'm never saying that it's logical, period. I'm saying it's logical according to this person and not logical according to that person. That's I'm trying to make that distinction here. I'm
Well,
not using it in a platonic sense outside of people.
this is what I was trying to get at earlier with what gives it the property of being
Yeah,
logical.
exactly.
Um, so when you say a view is logical if somebody is willing to say, or logical in their opinion, if they're
Yes.
willing to say this, and it has this property and contains this property, then it becomes logical because it's based on their opinion. So if you say, well, my opinion is that it's not logical, their opinion has made it, the other person's opinion has made it logical. Even if it's just for them, it's still logical. So if you say, well, no, I believe it contains this inconsistency, when they say, well, I believe it doesn't, you their belief that it isn't has made it logical according to your definition.
Yeah, that's the thing that I was trying to get at. Yes.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I was
Yeah.
trying to get at
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it seems like both of you, if you, I mean,
I mean, you say according to both of us, but have you considered that maybe your wording isn't quite giving
No, wait a
across?
minute. Maybe I can approach it from a different way. Would you say
hold
that?
on a second. Hold on.
Yeah.
Let
Sorry.
me
Go
try.
ahead.
Okay. It seems to me that what you two are agreeing on is that there's a sense in which a view can be logical just, in general, and that it still seems like you're removing the other person from the equation. The person, so there's going to be a person who believes flat Earth is logical, and there are going to be people who believe it's not logical. Okay,
Yeah.
and so when you speak to a flat earther, the very fact that that person believes flat Earth is logical does not make it logical in general. It has to be according to a certain person. There needs to be another person watching the discussion between the two, or something. I'm always going to want to tie it back to the person who's going to be agreeing or disagreeing. So it's going to be according. And that's what I was trying to get at in my document when I say "in your opinion." It's always logical in reference to the opinion of a specific person.
Yeah. I guess. So sorry. Like I promise you, I'm not trying to frustrate you. So like, if you prefer, I think we could just move on or something. But like, the thing is, like, you seem to be using logical as something that applies to a view, right? Like to a specific, let's say, yeah, view or opinion. Because like, there's a distinction. If you could say, for example, that logical is a term that applies to a person, let's say. So like, person is logical if it has all these properties. But if you say that a view can be logical or not logical, then there has to be something about that. Like, there has to be a set of properties that apply to the view, not the person that holds that view. And so like, that's why before, when I was saying is what I was saying is that you seem to be saying that a view is logical if there is at least one person that all these things, right?
No, I never speak like that.
Okay, but then why, like, how can does the word logical apply to a view?
Yeah, I always use it to refer to a view as an adjective that refers to a view, not the
Yeah,
entirety
that's
of the person, for one thing. All right, now I understand there are people who like to use it differently. I'm just specifying how I'm trying to use it here. Um, I never say a view is logical if at least one person. No, I'm saying that it's going to be logical in the flat earthers' view. Um, in the flat earthers' view, their own view is logical to them. They're going to claim that it's logical. Um, I don't know how else, because it seems like sometimes in your sentences, when you're trying to give me pushback, it seems like you're always leaving out the according to whom part, and
yeah, like
and that's fundamental to what I'm trying to get across. It's really not as complicated as you're making it seem like it might be.
yeah. I'm sorry if like I really I promise you I'm not trying to frustrate you, but like the way I see it, it's a bit like um, there has to be something, right, that is the property of that view itself, in my opinion, where that you compare that you can compare to say and actually find out if something is logical or not. Because otherwise, if you're tying it to the subject, it's always going to be true in a way, because it's always going to be true to the person. So it's like, let's say I have a cookie jar somewhere, and like I can say, oh, I believe that there are an odd number of cookies in there, and Dave can say, oh, I believe there is an even amount of cookies in there. But like me saying that I believe that does not make that, like, by definition, that there is a number of odd cookies in the jar or something like that, right? There is an answer about how many cookies are in the jar, and so whether the number is even or odd. And so if I were to say that something is odd, if I believe it to be odd, and if I'm willing to be quoted that it is odd, and if I have good reasons that there is an odd number of cookies in there, then that would be true, even though the cookies might be even, because I do believe, or I am willing to say that it is an odd number of cookies, and I am willing to be quoted on that, and I think I have good reasons
Okay,
for it.
all right. If you have reasons for it, then that's fine. If you have reasons for believing it, then that's fine. Then we can get into a discussion about what those
Yeah, but
reasons
that
are
still
and why.
doesn't
Hold on.
make the number of cookies odd necessarily,
That's
right?
why I was making a distinction between true and logical. When you say that your view is logical, that is trying to communicate that you can back it up with reasoning, and it doesn't necessarily. It's
Oh,
not necessarily the same as true, right?
okay, yeah,
So I am trying to make the distinction between something being true in your opinion and something being logical in your opinion. All right.
yeah, okay. But therefore, it's still problematic because it's a purely subjective thing, in my opinion. Like you, I can still have, like, if I believe it to have good, like, if I believe that I have good reasons, does that make that it's logical?
According to whom?
Yeah, according to me in this case. But
Yeah. In this
when you say
case, it would
according
make
to
it.
who,
In this
yeah.
case, it would make it logical to you. If you believe that your view is, if you have reasoning to back it up that has no contradictions that you can see, and you're willing to say it and be quoted as saying it, then according to you, that would be logical, and I would expect you to say that it is logical in your view.
Okay, yeah,
Now, I
the
disagree
thing,
with flat Earth. Okay, I'm not a
yeah,
flat Earther. I believe that the
Oh, no,
flat
don't
Earth
get me
view
wrong. I
is
wasn't trying to infer that you were.
yeah,
okay.
no,
Yeah,
nobody
yeah.
was
I'm
saying
just
Apologies
trying
that.
to.
if
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. I'm just trying to give you a concrete example of something that I believe is not logical. Okay, which would be the flat Earth position. Okay, so because I'm saying that it's not logical in my view, I would expect that if there's out there somewhere a flat earther who believes that flat Earth is a logical view, I would expect they would understand me as saying I disagree with them, and it's true, I do disagree with them, and so then we could come together in a debate, and we could provide reasoning for our conflicting opinions. That's all I'm trying to get at. That when we meet to talk to each other, both of us can provide reasons for why we disagree with each other. That's all I was trying to communicate with logical.
okay. Then perhaps that's a better way to word what you're putting. Um, Sorry, I'm just trying to save you further frustration in the future with people who you want to adopt this thing and want to have a discussion about your thing. Rather than, because the way you've worded it puts the entailment on whether something is logical on a personal opinion. Um, think about morality. When people say morality is subjective, what they're saying is that something is good or bad only based on the individual's opinion. Yeah. Um, so if you believe something is good, that makes it good for you, um, but that makes it good. Um, and if another person believes it's bad, neither of you are actually correct because there is no truth of the matter. Because what gives it the property of good is you thinking it's good. And the way you've worded that is making it so that whether something is logical
It's
is
logical.
based on the person, well, whichever term you want to use. It's based on the person thinking it the case. So when you come to have the agreement, the debate, both of you are actually correct because you have put the property based on what they believe rather than some external component too.
All right, so I
So if you
understand.
word it in the sense that not so much that something is logical if you believe X, Y, and Z, and therefore you can then debate this, word it in such a way that it's like if you believe something is true and you want to convince the other person that it's true, entering into a logical debate, you have to defend your position. You have to be willing to be quoted on your position, that kind of thing. It's just the wording that you've used makes it awkward, especially like if you want to get it to a more general audience.
All right, okay. So I understand. Like there's a debate between moral subjectivism and so yeah, I understand subjectivism. There's different meanings to how people use that word. Um, I think maybe this could be cleared up by us simply having a, a discussion right now on morality. Like maybe you and I, Dave, maybe we disagree on some moral issue, and I can explain to you why it is I think that my position would be better for people to hold than
Oh
your
no, I get
position.
that. That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm trying to do is try and refine that rule so that it contains less equivocation. It will be more acceptable to more people. It will stop. Like if you think about this discussion that we're having now, we've been discussing this for quite a while because of all this confusion. You might know what you mean. That's because you have access to your intent and your purpose and what you want to be saying. But as you said earlier, sometimes we don't have the words to accurately portray what we want. And that's the purpose of refining it to use as specific wording as possible so that your intent and meaning can come across to as many people as possible.
Oh,
Does that make
okay.
sense?
Okay, so when I proposed slogical, did that clear that up for you?
Not necessarily,
Okay.
because you're still putting the property of logical on whether or not somebody believes it is logical. So rather than saying something is logical, in your opinion, if X and X and X, Y, and Z, um, and that the way it's worded makes it seem like you're saying that it is logical because of X, Y, and Z.
So whenever I say whenever I say flat Earth, the flat Earth view is not logical, in my opinion. You think that my wording makes it sound like it's not logical. Period. Is that
No,
what you're saying?
no. But there is a separation between whether or not something is logical because you have added in certain properties to what makes something logical, as well as attributed the person's opinion to it making it logical. So there is a distinction between whether or not something is logical according to the inconsistencies in coherence and whether or not somebody believes it is logical. So there is a difference there. Something is not necessarily logical because somebody believes it is logical.
Can I just add something maybe? Like when you say that, in your opinion, flat Earth is not logical, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that? Because it seems to
All
me
right.
that you're saying that there are no people that are willing to be quoted on that, or like how do you get people in there? Because it seems to be necessary that you have someone in there for your definition. Because like you're saying that something is logical, like you never want to use logical without someone, right?
Right.
That is my understanding.
Right.
So when you say flat Earth is logical, whom are you referring to? Yeah, okay,
No, no,
you're
no, no. When I say flat Earth is not logical, in my
yeah,
opinion, I'm referring to myself. Okay.
yeah,
Now,
okay. So you said
according to their opinion, according to the flat earthers' opinion, it is logical in their opinion, and that's the first moment we're gonna find out that we disagree with each other. So if like you hear some random person on the street saying, "Oh my goodness, those flat earthers, they're ridiculous."
yeah,
Now, if a flat earther is walking by and hears that, that's going to be the first moment that they realize that the person speaking does not agree with them. Okay? And if I were to be walking on the street next to them and hear that, I would hear that as being the first moment that I know that that person agrees with me that flat Earth is not logical. Okay? So
okay,
all I'm trying to do is just get at this principle where people are they disagree, and it's like the first moment that you know that a person disagrees with you is when they express that the view is nonsense or sensical or whatever. Um, like I said, if any other, if this is still, I'm surprised that you're still hung up on this because it's like we could clear this up. I think if we were to just go into an example of some moral debate that we might have, a difference of opinion that we might have. For example, I believe it is morally bad for a person to act hypocritically. All right. Now, there are going to be people out there who disagree with that view, right? And um, so once they say that they disagree with my view, that's when I know that there's a potential debate that we could have. You understand?
Yeah. But most debates do come from disagreement anyway, except for something like a devil's advocate debate. Like, I know people that hold to I hold to compatibilism, and I can debate determinism for those who want to have a discussion about determinism or debate their own view about determinism or compatibilism. According to your rules, that would kind of rule me out because we don't actually have a disagreement. I'm just taking an opposing view in order to help them sharpen their own debate skills or refine their own views.
Yeah, if you're taking like a devil's advocate kind of position, that is outside of what I'm trying to get at with logical debate.
But it would still be considered logical debate as such. You're sort of co-opting a term that already has
Pretend I say
quite
it's
a
logical.
um whichever way you're using. I suppose you could change the term, and that would slightly change the meaning. So if you want to refer to it as something else, like I said, using logical debate, um, in that sense, would be sort of a form of equivocation because you're using it in a vague way to mean specifically you, but you're co-opting a term that already has a very specific meaning within culture.
Okay,
So
okay.
if I said football was the same as baseball, when I said and when I use the term football, I'm meaning this sport like football, like baseball. you're automatically going to come with baggage and disagreements.
I thought you were going to say when I say the word football is the same as soccer.
No, no, no. I thought I'd try and make it easier for you. But again, that's a good example of how a word with multiple meanings, when you come to a table using a specific meaning without hashing it out, can
That's
lead to
that's
sort of
fine.
misunderstanding.
I'm perfectly open to defining words as specifically as you want me to define them. That's why I proposed a new word, slogical, and so we can pretend that this is called slogical debate, okay? And I laid out my definition of the three pieces that you would need to call your own view slogical. And the rule one, just to get this out there, is that you need to, rule one is to debate logically or participate in logical debate or try to change your opponent's mind using logic, okay? Then rule two is to maintain that your views are logical until you change your mind. And change your mind, hold on a second, let me share this again.
You want me to share it? Yeah.
Hold on a second. All right, so here's rule one.
Okay, there you go. You're on screen.
So is to debate logically, and what I mean by that is to try to change your opponent's mind using logic. And I go into details about what I meant by that here. All right. Rule two is to maintain that your views are logical until you change your mind, and change your mind only for logical reasons. And here I laid out the definition of what I meant by logical. All right. Rule three is to limit debate to human actions and facts that are scientifically provable in your view, according to today's science and technology. All right, and I go into details about what I mean by that here. These are some examples of views that I don't think are scientifically provable, but something that you could perhaps change the wording of to make it into something that is scientifically provable. All right, and let me see. Rule four is to hold the view to state that it is morally bad for a person to act hypocritically. All right. I believe that this is the starting point for when you can have a disagreement with people on the subject of morality. Because when it comes to morality, it's important that both people agree that it's morally bad for a person to act hypocritically. And without this piece, I believe the whole debates about morality, they crumble and just end up going in circles. All right. And then rule five, which is the last one, is to state all your other moral views in that form, in the form of it is or is not morally good or bad for a person to do some action, some scientifically provable volitional action. And it's not just with moral views. Like I can there when you're talking about strategy, when you have a disagreement with someone over something involving strategy, you would have to state it in the same format. You would say something like, it is strategically good or strategically bad for a person to do this way in this situation. And and so you would hash out your disagreements in that form. And so I'm just trying to make it just trying to formalize what it is that I'm doing on a daily basis when I'm disagreeing with people. All right. Anything you want to say?
Yeah, it would really depend on some of the statements being made. So when you have a statement like it is morally good or morally bad, and you're saying that you have to expand it into those terms, you could just use moral or immoral. They mean the same thing. So by saying that it must be stated as X, you're sort of adding a component that doesn't necessarily need to be there.
I understand. I understand there are different ways to get across that point. All right. So.
Your thing disappeared from the screen. Sorry, I was reading it.
Oh, you want me to? Okay, okay. Yeah, it's like here.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Go back to rule 4. Yeah, nice one.
Yeah.
Okay. In your video, you state something like, you must first state that acting hypocritically is immoral because that's the grounds of all morality. Something
That
like
no,
that.
it's I'm trying to say what I let me see let me say it again. I believe that without this agreement, without both people agreeing on this statement, um, debates about morality will tend to go in circles. And so it's not the basis of all morality per se. It's the basis of a productive debate on morality. That's what I would say.
Okay. So what you're basically saying is something like before a debate begins, you must agree on what it is that is being debated, and terms must be defined, and some sort of grounding for where the debate to start. There must be a topic, basically.
Um, I I I guess.
Yeah. Okay. I can agree with that. I mean, it's uh, so the statement "it is morally bad for a person to act hypocritically" is just an example of a starting statement, rather than an example of your belief.
No, it's not just an example. It's part of Rule 4 that the participants in the debate, in the logical debate, need to agree with that. It's not. Um,
Okay, but I can debate morality without agreeing to that.
yeah, and in my view, such a debate would go in circles. So I'm trying
Why?
to. First of all, we're only speaking hypothetically at the moment,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But
but like,
if you say all moral debates will go in circles without that as a grounding statement, I would disagree with that. So then a
all right,
debate would start from
maybe I mean maybe we should just leave it there because, like, um, I think that it, if you're talking with someone, I mean, it's like this is the first thing you're gonna have to. I, this is the first thing that I would want to get the other person to agree with before I start talking about, is spanking your child immoral or whatever, right? Um, because without them agreeing to this, then there are ways in which the discussion can go in circles.
that. I
And
think. Sorry. If you're going to have a moral debate and you're both coming in to say that debate morality, wouldn't the first thing that you should actually define and agree on is what morality is, rather than whether or not it is bad to act
most
hypocritically?
people, in my view, most people have a sense of what morality is. Um, it's the philosophers who like to get into these really, you know, specific conversations about just what kind of morality are we talking about, and
No, not
most the
necessarily. Meta ethics attempts to to define morality. Like, and let me give you a real world example here. Think of a Muslim and a Christian. Both of them would argue or come to the table with the idea that morality are God given commands through revealed texts. But each revealed text would be a different revealed text. So each one would be a different definition of morality.
okay,
And say an atheist might come to the table with morality is judgments about good or bad based on personal opinion. So you would really need to, before saying it is morally bad for a person to act hypocritically, you would have to nail down what morality is before any kind of discussion about morality.
all right, I disagree on that point. I believe that the Christian and the Muslim have a fundamentally good enough understanding of what morality is to allow them to communicate in English in the first place. And so it's like even if they disagree on the specific parts of what God is telling them to do, at least they both understand that if they believe God told them to do one thing and then they do another thing, then that would be a case of hypocrisy. Um, and so I think the basic definitions are already understood by most people to the point where I don't need
Okay.
to go into that much
But
detail
then
here.
then we bring in the atheist that argues that all morality is subjective, so they wouldn't think it is morally bad to act hypocritically because morally bad is just whatever they believe to be good or bad at the time.
And I would debate with them. Let's actually debate about something that we actually disagree with instead of in hypothetical.
Okay, name something.
All right, first of all, do you believe it is morally bad for a person to act hypocritically?
No.
Why not?
Because in the sense of something like, imagine a father promising to take their son to the cinema, and instead a job offer comes up. And this job interview is for a dream job that would allow them to live even better. He has promised his child to take him to the cinema, but instead he goes to the job interview. That's acting hypocritically because he might believe it best to take his son to the cinema because he's made a promise and you shouldn't break promises. But the job interview has more value for them, so he goes to that. So he has acted hypocritically, but he has not acted immorally.
Um, okay, so first of all, I was surprised you didn't simply agree with the statement because it seemed to me like um, several minutes ago when I claimed that we were just talking hypothetically, and you agreed that you were just talking hypothetically. I didn't think that you actually disagreed with the statement that it is morally bad for a person to act hypocritically. Um, so if you actually do disagree with that statement, then yeah, we could actually get into this in earnest.
Yeah.
It's
I
like
mean,
we should
I
have.
could even argue it in a devil's advocate kind of way.
I don't want a devil's advocate position. I want your actual position.
Okay, then yeah, I don't believe it's always morally, always immoral. How do you word it? Always morally wrong?
Yeah, that's
Is that the
fine.
wording you generally prefer to use?
You don't believe it's morally bad for a person to act hypocritically.
Not in every instance, no.
Okay. So so it's like before we even get into a discussion about you know is it yeah, like this would be the first thing I would want to convince you of before we get into discussions about other action, the morality of other actions. So the example that you gave here, this would count as an example of hypocrisy if the father believes that it is morally good to always keep your promises, and then he breaks his promise, right? That would be an example of acting hypocritically. Um, and so I would say that, like in this example, he shouldn't have said it's always more. He shouldn't have said that it's morally good to always keep your promises in the first place, because I would suggest that there is a high probability that the person is eventually going to break a promise somewhere, and so that standard, that moral view was, it was too high a hurdle for an ordinary human to meet in the first place, and so caveats should have been added to that statement before he said it. Um, and so, like, if you're saying that it's good that the father broke the promise in this situation, or something like that, it's not necessarily bad that he broke the promise. It it could be that you simply, hmm, let me see how to explain. Like, imagine that I say, like, for example, one of the actual views that I do hold is that it's morally good to work hard at work, right? And so, one, if you don't agree with my view about working hard, um, there are certain things that you could do to try to change my mind on this issue. You could point out that actually working hard is not necessarily good because of this, and this. And if that doesn't convince me, you can go into and further say, hey, Kris, like, um, In fact, when you say that you're working hard at work, you're not actually working hard at work, because I've seen you taking breaks at this time, and this time, right? You're taking breaks, so you yourself are not following your own moral view that you the way you laid it out. And so there are multiple ways you can go about trying to change a person's mind on this. But like one of the best ways is to point out a person's hypocrisy. So when you start accusing me of being hypocritical because I'm taking breaks, that's a very effective way in my view. And so that's, if you don't specify that hypocrisy is bad, you're taking away one of the most effective tools at getting people to change their minds. You do you disagree with anything I said?
I sort of do, because that's too simplistic of a statement. Working hard might not necessarily mean not taking any breaks, because you need breaks. So to say that taking breaks is hypocritical to the idea of working hard, um, that's not necessarily the case.
Okay. Um, is there anything else? Okay. So what about what I'm saying about the tools in your arsenal when you're trying to change a person's mind on an issue of morality? One of the biggest tools is to point out the way in which they are acting hypocritically. Do you disagree?
Um, yes.
Um,
Let's use a classic example here. Um, let's go with the Kantian idea of lying. Okay, Kant argues that it's always bad to lie. Now, if we take the example of a German couple hiding Jews in the attic, and the Nazis come and knock on the door and say, "Have you seen any Jews? Are you hiding Jews?" And they lie and say no. They're acting hypocritically if they believe that it's wrong to lie, but they're not behaving immorally.
okay. Is that in your view or in Kant's view?
That's in my view.
Okay. So, first of all, I would want to specify that to lie is one of the actions that I don't believe is scientifically provable using today's science and technology. All right. And so, first of all, I would want to change that word lie into something that could be proven true or false. Um, so,
Well, the statement could be proven true or false by going up into the attic and seeing if there's Jews there,
which statement would be proven false?
that there's no Jews in the attic.
All right, but when a person says to lie, to me that implies an intentional misstatement of truth, or a mis and it implies intent. Intent is in,
It implies an intent to deceive.
right, and that intent is what I'm claiming, in my view, is not provable.
Well, yeah, it's quite provable in that situation, because they intended to deceive the Nazis of the fact that there are Jews hidden in the attic. By telling them that there is none, they intend to give false information.
This is a hypothetical situation. You're stipulating that they are intending to make to tell a falsehood. Okay,
Well,
but
yeah,
in the
it's
world,
entailed by.
in the world as we see it, how would you go about proving that a person intended to make a misstatement instead of simply them making a misstatement? I don't believe that's
by
provable unless they
the,
actually say, "Hey, I'm intending this."
well, what if they say, "I intended to deceive the guards because I think the saving of the Jews was better"? Would that count?
Sure, you could say, uh,
Okay, then that scientifically proves that they intended to deceive the guards.
all right.
But
So their admission.
that still wouldn't make their hypocrisy immoral?
It would, according, let me see. Okay, so you are the one who believes that it's not necessarily morally bad to act hypocritically. Kant is the one who says that it is always morally bad to lie. But if we were to, but because we've come to an understanding that to lie is not necessarily provable, and if we were to reword that and say that it's always, that Kant's view is that it is always morally bad for a person to explicitly state that they're intending to make a misstatement.
That's not what Kant was saying.
That's
Kant was
not my
saying that,
claim.
yeah, but the way you've expanded the statement then makes it
Yeah.
that's what Kant was trying to say.
Well, I'm not trying to say what Kant actually said. I'm trying to change it in light of the fact that you and I
Yeah,
both agree that lying is not necessarily provable. So if we change the hypothetical a little bit, if you bear with me, and we change the
okay.
hypothetical a little bit, okay, then it'll become that in Kant's view, hypothetically, now that we've changed it a little bit, it becomes that Kant's view is that it is morally bad for a person to explicitly state that they're intending to deceive the Nazis about where the Jews are or whatever. Okay, um, but even in that case, Kant's position that it is immoral to admit that what that you're lying, um, to me, even that presupposes that Kant believes it's morally bad to act hypocritically. I mean, I would imagine that Kant would have said right from the beginning that, like, if he believes that it's morally bad to lie, then it would also be bad for a person. It would be bad for him to just turn around and lie anyway, right? I mean, he would be acting hypocrite. Anyway, it would seem strange to me that Kant would be okay with hypocrisy if he's not okay with lying. You know.
Can't see in that. But I hold as a general duty that it is wrong to lie. But I also believe that there are certain duties that have higher value. So in those cases, while I may have broken a duty to lie, I had a greater duty to something else. So therefore, I have not acted immorally by behaving hypocritically.
All right. So in that situation, what I would do is I would change the wording so that you would add in exceptions to the rule, and you explicitly state, here are the exceptions I'm thinking of. So, for example, in this
Yeah, but
situation,
if I have stated a situation or an exception before, because I've not actually been put in that situation or thought of that situation, I have still broken that duty no matter how specific I become if it does not include that statement.
all right, so you're capable of changing your mind when you're put in a new situation that you didn't foresee.
Okay,
So
but you're still acting hypocritically.
what I'm saying, um, all right, the framework that I'm setting up, it allows you to say, first of all, it's morally bad for a person to act hypocritically. Second of all, it is morally bad to admit to having the intent to mislead someone, except in the case of the Nazis, or in the case, the example of Kant's Nazis, uh, and except in the situation where you have you know, you made a promise to someone, and you can add as many exceptions as you want, as you can think of at the moment, and then a person who wants to debate you on this issue could say, wait a minute, but what about this situation? Did you think about this situation? And then they can debate you into adding another exception to your view. So it's possible. The whole point is to get each other to change each other's minds. So yeah, I wouldn't say that that's an example of you finding a hole in my framework or anything.
Okay. Then we can take it down to what exactly is morality.
We've had this whole discussion.
Well, no, we haven't, because all you said was people use certain definitions of morality. If in the case of an emotivist, what is moral is just a feeling of what you think is moral. If somebody doesn't feel that it's hypocritical to behave immorally, then is it wrong to behave immorally for them?
Again, you're bringing up a hypothetical. I'm more interested in your actual views. When I speak to the
If,
emotivist, I will discuss this with them. Let me discuss that with them. Right now, my hands are full trying to get you to see that making the statement that it is morally bad to act hypocritically is in fact a good basis for us to have a discussion, disagreement on morality. Um, I need to find a way to get you to understand that if you don't have an agreement with the other person that morality is bad, hypocrisy is bad. If you don't start with that, if you don't start with that foundation, the discussion can just go into circles. Now, maybe after today, I can go off on the internet and I'll find, maybe I can gather up some examples of people having a disagreement, and then it comes out that actually there's one person who doesn't believe that hypocrisy is bad, and so that just tears down the entirety of their argument. And maybe I can show you some examples of that some other time. Um,
but again, like I say, you can start a discussion on morality without actually agreeing to that, and it won't go round in circles.
all right, I guess. I
Like
guess
like I
if
said, I don't believe acting hypocritically is immoral. So
all
that
right, all right.
we
So for
still
example,
have.
all right. So for example, what is? Give me an example of something that you do actually think is morally bad. Not the hypothetical, but something that you actually do believe.
Torturing small children for fun. That's always an interesting one.
Okay, and it's not merely interesting in your view; it's the actual view that you actually hold, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, of course.
That that would be morally bad. Okay, now, what if you were to actually go and torture small children for fun? What would that say about you?
I would say I behaved immorally because torturing small children for fun is immoral. It's not the hypocrisy that makes it immoral. It's the action.
What I'm hearing, if you were to say, and you did say that torturing small children for fun is morally bad, and then you turn around and say at the same time that it's not necessarily morally bad to act hypocritically. To
Well, no,
me,
you just
to
asked what
me,
would happen if I tortured small children. That would be me behaving immorally. The hypocrisy wouldn't isn't what would make it immoral, though. It would be the causing the intentional suffering of a small child for fun.
all right, in your view, yes, I see. But to me, what that communicates is that you're willing to make statements that don't necessarily, um, your actions and your statements are not necessarily going to be coherent with each other. You're willing to just say stuff like,
Well,
"Oh,
no,
torching babies for fun is bad," but then you're considering that like there's a possibility that tomorrow you're going to actually go out and do it, and that wouldn't necessarily there wouldn't necessarily be a problem with that. Like like if there were someone else,
problem
if there were
because
somewhere,
torture. Sorry,
all right, so if there were somewhere else in the world, um, torturing babies for fun, right? You, it seems to me that you would be willing to just go around condemning that person, saying that what they're doing is wrong, but you won't commit to yourself. You won't commit publicly that you yourself wouldn't do it.
sorry. Can you rephrase that?
All right. Are you willing to say here and now that you will never torture babies for fun?
Uh, As long as my mental capacities hold, yes.
Okay, so then you should have no problem with saying that it is morally bad to act hypocritically on this point.
Okay, but I could torture small children for fun and still say it's wrong. I just don't care.
That's hypothetically you could say that, yes, but do you care or do you not care in actuality?
Well, I do. But what I'm getting at is the statement acting hypocritically is immoral. It's not the acting hypocritically that makes the action immoral. It's the breaking of moral duties or causing of suffering or things like that.
All right, I'm just trying to. Um,
Okay, let's go with another example. Torturing a terrorist. Have you ever heard of the ticking bomb scenario? Okay, so you could claim that it's immoral to torture somebody, generally. Um, and then you might want to save the population, so you torture the terrorist and get the information. You would still be behaving immorally. You would just be admitting to it. You would be being hypocritical. You
mhm.
could say, I don't think it was good that we had to torture him, but still do it because there is a greater duty to be held.
And so, in that case, I would say that your words before you tortured the person are in contradiction with your actions. I mean, you're so to other people, it would indicate that no one should listen to you because you're willing to do the very thing that you claim is morally bad. Um, yeah, so I want there to be a correspondence between what you're willing to say is, if you say the action is morally bad, as I have it written up on this document here, then that implies that you are not going to do that action. Um, so, so if you do that action, you're acting hypocritically. And in order to get out of that situation, that hypocritical state, you either have to change your mind on the morality of the issue, or you could like add in an exception for if there's a ticking bomb, or or change your mind about or swear to never to never torture a terrorist again, or something like that. So um, yeah, that's it.
See, this is why pinning down what morality actually is important. Rather than just saying acting hypocritically is immoral, pinning down what morality actually is important. A meta-ethical discussion is what is more necessary when beginning a debate on morality, because just agreeing that something acting hypocritically is immoral won't really get you anywhere. It won't be the foundation of that discussion or the disagreement, because the disagreement comes from what we see as moral. You say, well, most people have this general idea of what's moral, only philosophers pin down the greater details. That's not necessarily true, because there are people that are consequentialists, there are people that are emotivists.
Again,
I'm not.
okay, okay,
What I'm arguing against is that basic principle.
okay. We can get into discussions about what kind of different people can have different moral systems. That's fine. I'm okay with that. That can happen within the framework that I'm laying out. Okay. Um, like even now between me and you, the way I would frame this conversation that we're having right now is that I'm trying to use statements that I believe are true and logical to get you to change your opinion on my rule 4. Okay? Because I believe it is morally bad for a person to act hypocritically. You have explicitly stated you disagree with that position, and I am currently in the process of trying to get you to change your opinion on that specific statement. Okay? And you're trying to change my opinion uh, and try to get me to realize that that role is not an important one. Okay? And so we are trying to change each other's minds. I would call this a debate in my particular parlance. I understand you would prefer me not call it a debate if it's not a formal, structured debate, perhaps. And we can have a discussion like we're having right now. You think that pinning down the exact type of metaphysics I'm using or
Meta.
ethics that I'm using is important, but I'm saying that actually, so we're going to have a fundamental disagreement about that because I should have said this at the beginning for the people who are just watching and don't know, but I don't believe that academic philosophy is very useful, and I believe that there is no useful kind of academic philosophy that is not already being done by people who do not study academic philosophy. And so I do think that philosophers have been arguing in circles, and some of them explicitly come out and say that they're proud of that tradition of rehashing old ideas over and over. But I'm trying to ground it in more of something that'll move forward, like science. Science makes progress, in my view. And I like that's why I like science more.
Okay.
All right. Um, so hopefully your viewers or the people watching might be able to explain better why it is that you should not be okay with people acting hypocritically. Um, and maybe I'll be able to scrounge up some details of people on the internet going in circles because one of them doesn't actually believe it's hypocritical or morally bad to act hypocritically. Um, so, Philip, I mean, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't. I don't think so. I guess I just strongly disagree with your last statements there about philosophy, but I mean that
Do
might be a
you,
thing that we.
by the way, do you believe it is morally bad for a person to act hypocritically?
Um, I would actually agree with Dave there. I think you have to sort of define, like, in my opinion, probably you could make a case from that because, like, I would call myself roughly a consequentialist in a way, and so I think um, I could say that acting hypocritically is morally bad. But in a sense, I also think that it is. I get what Dave was saying. Like, if you define already like an action or a set of actions as bad, then like you instantiating them makes it bad. You don't need to say, well, that is sort of in contradiction with each other. Like you can say, well, in my view, that is bad. And so if I were to torture small children, that would be bad because it is my view that torturing small children is bad because of the consequences, let's say.
Okay.
But you could also say that acting in ways that do not reflect your beliefs in general could lead to bad consequences, something like that.
Okay, so that was a
So
hypothetical. What is your actual position? Do you believe that people? So you, I think I understood you as saying that because of the consequences, it actually is morally bad to act hypocritically. Is that your position?
I would say most of the times, yes. It's not a general thing, but yes, most of the time that would
Can
be
you think
true.
of a counter example? A counter? Can you give an
Yeah, I
example of?
think Dave gave some pretty good examples. Like, I might believe that in general it is bad to lie, but in certain scenarios, if I have to save someone's life, for example, I would say that it wasn't bad for me to act hypocritically.
So, what did you think about how I wanted to reword to lie such that it would be a provable thing to other people? I mean, did you take that on board?
Could you rephrase that again so
Um,
that I?
okay, so every time I hear you say that this could be the case or that could be, if, and you're saying if, that turns the statement into a hypothetical. And I want to actually know what your actual position is on these things. So, like in the example of
Yeah, but
the Nazi, for example, you're saying yeah, in this case, it could be that, it is bad or whatever, but I want your actual position. Is it
My actual position is that in that scenario, it would be acceptable for them to lie. It would not be immoral for them to lie. That is my actual position. The fact that the scenario is hypothetical is
okay?
is
Okay.
is not a problem.
Okay. So, how would we go about proving this? Do you believe it's possible to prove that someone is lying?
It depends on what you mean by proof. I think in general, your distinction about like something that can be scientifically proven is not as important as you think, and a bit unhelpful. Because, for example, you could make a good case that someone is lying. For instance, if someone, let's say, lives in a house, right, and has a dog. Let's say you can observe this dog,
Mm-hmm.
and then when you encounter them somewhere, they say, "Oh, I don't have a dog." Now, it might be true that they are sincerely thinking that they don't have a dog because they have like a memory loss of some sort or whatever other position. But I think you can make a very solid case that it is very likely that they're actually lying to you because they live in that house and you have seen the dog. And like every day you pass by that house and you look through the window and you see that dog. And I think you can very strongly say that they are lying because it is likely that they have like said that with the intention of deceiving you.
All right. So it's the intent part that I'm saying is what makes it not a provable thing. Um,
Yeah, but
so
why not? Like, if they say to you that they don't have a dog, but you have seen
what's the
that they have a
definition of
dog,
dog? That's one of the things I would
and
want to get at.
what the definition of dog
What
is.
their definition of dog is. What do they mean by dog? And it's like, if they say they don't have a dog, and you can go like you could say, okay, so what was that animal that I saw in your house? And they'll say, oh, that's called a cat in my view, or something like that, right?
Mhm.
So that's a possible lane.
Yeah,
Of
that's like I'm not saying that it is impossible. Like I gave you a couple of other examples. Like they might have like a memory loss, and maybe they just forget every 2 minutes. And so when they are like when you encounter them, they don't remember that they have a dog, and so they're not doing that with the intent of deceiving you. So that might be like, as you say, that they might not be lying to you. But I think you can make like in all likelihood, I would say it is the case that they are lying. And so I don't necessarily think that you have to prove anything to have meaningful discussions about what is likely and what is not and what your beliefs are. So it is the same, for example, for the discussions for the existence of God. I don't expect theists to prove that God exists because I don't think that's possible. And I don't think I can prove that God doesn't exist, for instance. But I think they might have good reasons, and I might have good reasons for why I think that God doesn't exist, and them for why they think that God does exist. Even if it doesn't prove that, you can still make observations about what is more likely and what is less likely, and that can lead to productive discussions.
Ooh, that last part there, that's what I'm interested in. So to me, once you start debating about whether God exists or not, and you've already admitted that it's not possible to prove one way or the other, scientifically speaking,
Yeah.
then in my view, that's exactly the kind of discussion that you can have that will potentially last hundreds of years. And that's what academic philosophers love to do, and that's fine. It's just that does not, in my view, is not productive in the sense that it'll make progress. We're not going to get to the bottom of that with scientific evidence.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, you can make certain, like, for instance, if someone believes that God can only exist if he intervenes in the natural world, then you can make certain scientific observations that can lead as, or can serve as defeaters in a way to that position, or
Hypothetically,
other. I mean, yeah, I'm talking hypothetically now. Yes.
yes,
Yeah, but I don't understand why that is an issue.
because you already specifically said that it's not possible to prove one way or the other. That's why I don't think
Yes,
that would
but
be a productive discussion in the sense that I mean and that science evidence is used to prove or disprove certain theories and stuff like that. I like the kind of progress that science makes because
Okay.
philosophy tends, in my view, to go in circles.
Okay, let me ask you the following. Do you think that, like, what is your definition? How would you define or describe proof? Sorry.
Um, well, it has similar properties to logic. Okay, so if something can be scientifically proven to be true in your view, in my let me just say, in my view,
Yeah.
I will say that something is provable if I'm willing to say that it's provable scientifically, if I'm willing to be quoted as saying it's provable scientifically, and I can think of situations in which, using today's science and technology, we can observe a situation, or we can come up with a situation in which evidence can be, a certain amount of evidence can be compiled that would be convincing proof to me that.
Okay. Yeah, but that seems to me like a scenario like, for instance, the one I was running before, like the liar scenario, where you can sort of have a high degree of confidence that this person is actually lying. Like, you could be wrong, as we already established, but in a way, there are many things in science, for example, that could be wrong as well, right? Like, technically, you could think of, like, I'm not saying that they are. I think that they are very convincing in the sense that you have a very strong inductive case for most of the discoveries of science. But still, I mean, it could be that it is wrong,
Mhm.
that you have discovered. So would you say that it's still proven, that these things are proven, even though there could be, like, for instance, we could be in the matrix and all that stuff, simulation, and so everything is not the way it seems, or stuff like that, right? So the question is, I guess, would you still say that these things are proven?
All right, for example, I believe the earth is round. All right,
Yes.
I believe that has been proven to me. All right,
Yeah.
I believe the evidence on it being round, um, because I believe that the amount of evidence has overcome a threshold within my head
Hmm.
that has convinced me that it is now proven in that sense. Okay, and so
Okay.
I'm willing to
Can
go
I
out.
just
I'm willing to go out and say that it is proven that the earth is round. I'm willing to be quoted as saying that. And I can
Mhm.
provide reasoning if you ask me further questions about exactly what counts as proof or what counts as evidence, whatever. We can get into all of that. But the basics, the fundamental thing is that, to me, the evidence has overcome some threshold that I'm holding to. And you can,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I see that. Like, I would describe that roughly in the same way for myself. Um, would you say that there are different thresholds for, like, what you believe and uh, what you would say is proven, right? For instance, I think, like, I believe many things that I don't necessarily, that have not met the threshold in my head for proof.
Okay.
Okay,
Like
so I
for
have
me,
two different thresholds. I have a threshold for when I say, okay, I have good enough reasons to say, okay, now I believe this thing to be
hmm,
true because I see many good reasons. And then there's this other threshold in my head that needs to be met for me to say that it is proven.
right, right. And so, for example, for me, personally, that would, um, like I believe that aliens are very likely to exist, right?
Yeah,
And so for me, I would say, yeah, I think aliens exist. Um, I can't prove it, right? So
exactly.
it doesn't meet that threshold. But I personally believe that aliens exist. So that would fall into that category. Um, but when it comes to getting into a debate with someone, I wouldn't necessarily want to debate someone on this point that aliens exist, specifically because using today's science and technology, I cannot prove it. Um, and so I would only want, so that the discussion would not be productive in that sense. I would want,
I mean, but I don't think I agree with, like, okay, I get that you want to restrict the debate spectrum to only these types of debates, and that's fine, right? Like someone can decide to do that. I don't have an issue with that. But like I think I don't see why you would, like, personally, I still find it a productive thing to just discuss things that I believe to be true, even if I don't think they have met a threshold of proof necessarily. Like I think it would be still a productive discussion, like debating the existence of aliens, for example, as you said. Maybe I would say, oh, look at this, there's this famous equation here that shows that it's very likely that life exists, and blah blah, and we would expect that, and someone else might say something differently. But it could still change my mind. I could still change my mind on that issue, and I think it would be a good thing for me to change my mind if I'm wrong on or if I don't have good reasons to think that, even though it's not proven or has nothing to do with necessarily meeting that threshold of proof.
All right. So as long as you understand that using the parameters that I'm laying out, the framework that I have here that I called logical debate, as long as you understand that I'm going for something more confined where each person can potentially bring scientific evidence to back them up, then that's fine. If you're
Yeah,
okay,
but
if you
yeah, at
like
the
to
same
have
time,
discussions about, if you like to have discussions about aliens, then that's fine. I mean, that's, it could be fun, I suppose. I'm just saying that I want to restrict it further down to the domain of things that we have evidence for, the domain of human actions that can be scientifically proven using today's science and technology.
okay, yeah. I mean, I think you can have evidence even for things that are not proven. But for the second part, yes. I mean, if you want to restrict to just things that are proven, then I guess you can have that sort of discussion. Although I don't, like, I find those debates generally to be the most boring one, if I can say so, because if something is already proven by science, like I generally find it acceptable to say that that is true, and if someone thinks otherwise, like I don't have much interest in debating flat earthers, for example. I can see why someone might want to do that, but I personally wouldn't particularly find that interesting, because I think I have very, very strong reasons to think, because precisely because it is proven by science, to think that the Earth is a globe. So I don't see, like for myself at least, much interest in engaging in that discussion. And the same would go for something like evolution and creationism and stuff like that. So I guess
Okay.
automatically what I am more drawn to is things that are not proven by science, because those to me are just like, okay, I accept them because I generally find the evidence convincing that is presented by science, and that's it then. But if you want to do otherwise, I can understand that. Like it's
Okay, it's fine. It just seems that we have, you know, affinities to different things. That's all. Um, yeah, I mean, not everyone's gonna like having scientific discussions or anything. It's just a matter of what level. You know, I'm just trying to restrict it to things where you could potentially bring scientific evidence to back you up. And like, if you tend to like debates where, like, for example, scientists can disagree with each other, right? And so
yes.
even so, scientists will have in their heads a different view of what counts as evidence for and against different positions. All right.
Yeah.
So when they
Okay.
disagree with each other, that's going to fit perfectly within this framework.
Yeah, but that wouldn't be in logical debate, though, according to you, because it hasn't been proven yet by
No,
science, right?
no. It's, remember the properties of logical. As long as
Yes.
each scientist, as long as this scientist thinks that his views are provable,
Yes.
potentially, and this person believes their own
Oh, wait,
views
wait, wait,
are.
wait, 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 wait. Is the distinction between potentially provable or like, because saying that something is provable or proven is different from saying that it is potentially
All right,
provable.
all right. Again,
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
don't want to bore you with
it's
the
fine. It's fine.
distinction in words. I just
I'm just going to repeat that
okay.
in the same way that I described to you what I'm, the way I'm using logic and logical. I'm envisioning two people who will be disagreeing with each other, each of whom is going to believe that their own view meets a certain threshold, okay? And then they'll be able to debate with each other using my framework, all right? So, scientist one will believe that, for example, lying cannot, let me see. Scientist one will believe that the Sphinx is not as old as people think. And scientist two will believe that the Sphinx is as old as the consensus says. All right? Both of whom think that their own view has reached the point of, that they have evidence to back up their beliefs. And so they're going to be able to debate on that according to the framework that I'm setting forward.
Okay, but having evidence for your beliefs is different from saying that, like, that's what we were talking about before. Like, having evidence for your beliefs is different from saying that it is proven, right?
In
Like,
whose
I can
view?
have evidence.
According to whom?
According to me, like according to how I understand evidence, and how that's why I was talking to you before about these two thresholds, and I thought that we agreed for a moment that there is different threshold for what I believe than there is for what, like, I think is proven. So for example, you can have very good evidence up to a point where I would say, okay, now I believe that, but then there would be another threshold to that. That's why I
fine.
asked if there is a distinction in
Yes,
your view
yes.
between what is proven and what is just sort of believable, like warrants belief.
Okay, now all you have to do is apply that same thought process to two different individual scientists. Scientist one will believe there are two thresholds for him. Okay, there's going to be a
Yes.
threshold for belief
Yeah.
and a threshold for proof. Scientist
Yeah.
two is going to have possibly different threshold for belief and possibly different threshold for proof. Okay, and they
Yes.
will disagree with each other, and they can debate with each other within this framework. So that's all I'm saying.
Okay, but if none of them believes that they have met the threshold of proof, would you still say that they can debate that topic on under your set of rules? Like if both believe that they have very good reasons to think that, but they don't think that that proves that it is the case, would you say that then they can still discuss the topic,
Well, they
or
can
under
sure
your?
they can discuss it outside of this framework that I'm laying
Okay, so
forward.
not within that, not within your framework. That was my question.
Right, because the whole point of this
Okay.
framework is to limit the discussion to things that where potentially you could bring evidence to support your positions. And so,
Yeah,
scientific
but no,
evidence
no, no.
that you think,
This
yes,
this is the
scientific
misunderstanding.
evidence that you think proves your position
Okay,
to
that's fine.
counteract the position of the other person who believes that their evidence has proven their position. All right?
Okay, yeah, but I would just add that I believe that that thing can happen like way before we meet the threshold of proof. I understand that you think differently, and that's fine. But
Okay.
like in my view, you can have this sort of discussion. Like I have this evidence, and I try to. I don't want to use the word debunk here, but I can show why your evidence is not as good or something like that,
Okay.
and you can do that even before you get to this like standard of threshold that you might have. But I
All
guess
right.
we just
I think we've reached an understanding.
okay.
One quick question from me. You're saying about scientific evidence, and you must be able to scientifically prove something under your framework before you can discuss it. Is that correct?
Hold on. Let me share my screen once again. Let me look for the part where I specifically mention. Um, let me see. Okay, here. Human actions are defined as scientifically provable in your opinion if you are willing to say they are scientifically provable in your opinion. You are willing to be quoted as saying they are scientifically provable in your opinion. And you can think of a way to scientifically prove that someone performed those actions under ideal circumstances using today's science and technology. If your opponent mentions an action that is not scientifically provable in your opinion, you must say so and ask him to define or reword the action until you can agree that it is scientifically provable. Okay, or for example, you could ask him, how would you scientifically prove that someone performed that action under ideal circumstances using today's science and technology?
Okay. So scientific proof isn't necessary to be able to debate a topic under your framework.
You would need to, because of Rule
Like,
3,
what if you agreed that there could be no scientific proof for something?
If you agree that there could be no scientific proof for something, then that would fall outside of Rule 3, which says to limit debate to human actions and facts that are scientifically provable using today's science and technology. So you can still have the discussion. It's just I wouldn't call it the kind of debate that would lead to people changing their minds more easily. You could still have that debate. I just wouldn't call it logical debate the way I'm defining it here. That's all.
Oh, okay, but you include debates about morality in this, don't you?
Yes.
Okay, can you scientifically prove what morality is? Isn't morality conceptual rather than physical?
What I would say is that when you say an action is morally good or morally bad, the action that you're referring to needs to be it needs to be a human action that could conceivably be scientifically proven using today's science and technology. So when
Okay,
we're
but
talking about so
that
all I'm
doesn't
trying to get at
contribute.
is that when people are debating about morality, I want them to debate about the morality of actions that could conceivably be scientifically proven, and I want to limit the domain of the debate to those actions only.
Okay, but just general conceptual moral debates do that as such.
I guess we are gonna. I guess we dis-
Well,
disagree. I guess.
the the concept of morality is about discussing human interactions. Even if they're hypothetical human interactions, they're about discussing the good and bad. Oops, sorry, hang on.
Yeah, I'm stopping the screen share.
Yeah, I was just closing it down so in the recording we all come back. Um, yeah, but you're still stuck with the problem of being able to prove scientifically what morality is because morality is conceptual.
I'm not.
That's why there's debates going on about what exactly it is.
It's because of I'm not interested in scientifically proving uh, what morality what morality is. I'm not interested in that. I mean, philosophers can do that on their own or something. I'm interested in limiting. Like I said, I mean, do you at least understand what I'm trying to do?
Yeah, you're basically trying to say discussions about morality should only be about actions that we can show that humans make using science.
Close. It's that the framework that I'm setting up here for logical debate, I believe that debates can move forward and be more productive if they are debating the morality of actions that could conceivably be scientifically proven. And if you're talking about the morality of an action that cannot necessarily be scientifically proven, even under ideal circumstances, then that's the kind of debate that I believe will tend to go in circles. And so that's all I'm. So you can still have the debate. It's just I'm not interested in it, and I don't think it will be productive.
Okay, you're not going to get very far in debates about morality like that, unfortunately.
But I do.
I'm not necessarily sure that you do. Beyond people that don't actually or have the most basic grasp of morality, they have a grasp like you do. Well, people understand what is meant by morality. Beyond that, you're going to have problems.
All right. Well, again, I'm going to have problems with perhaps academic philosophers like yourself who want to get into the nitty gritty of which meta ethics I'm using and all of that. But with normal people in my daily life that I experience and on issues of politics and all of that, I think that most people who vote and have opinions on what the laws should be, I think those people typically know what is meant by morality, so that I don't need to go and worry about how I'm going to scientifically prove that an action is moral or something like that. I'm not interested in those kinds of conversations. I'll just leave that to the philosophers.
But that's what conversations about morality are about whether an action is good or bad, not whether it can be proven that it's taken place or whether we can prove that somebody intends to do something. That is the basic core of discussion about morality, whether or not actions are good or bad.
As long as you understand that I'm not trying to scientifically prove that something is morally good, then I think we've understood each other.
Okay. Yeah, it just seems that there's a conflict between your idea of the framework of your debate style and discussions about morality itself.
Okay. But it seemed to me that you were trying to point out several minutes ago. You were looking at Rule 3, the way I have it, about limiting debate to actions that are scientifically provable, and then you asked me, is it possible to scientifically prove that?
I was looking at Rule 3. I was looking at the statement you made earlier that debate should be limited to things that are scientifically provable.
Well, I hope I've cleared up that misunderstanding.
Not necessarily, because you still made the statement that debate should be limited to where we can bring in, scientific evidence, because otherwise stuff goes around in circles.
All right, so it's an issue of nuance. When you're trying to express what my position is back to me, it seems like there's an issue with the nuances of that. Like I said, you can go ahead and have those kinds of discussions. You don't need. I'm not saying that you can't or that you shouldn't. I'm just saying that, in my view, those discussions will go in circles if you do not limit it to the domain of actions that can be scientifically proven.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's a good I mean, when you repeat when you try to express what my position is, I hope that you include that nuance.
I'm not sure it's necessarily a nuance.
Well, I would like you to say it anyway.
Okay, but I probably won't ever be discussing this with people. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to have the discussion and get your ideas out there.
All right. Well, if you ever do mention me and my views again, I hope that you include all the caveats that I've tried to make clear here today.
I'll just point people towards the video.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Is there anything else, Philip?
No, I don't think so. No, at least not. No. I don't think
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate talking to both of you. Thanks for making time for me, because no one else is interested in this stuff, and giving me a chance. So yeah, it was a good discussion.
I mean, if you want future discussions, hit me up. I can usually arrange something at a weekend.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was nice
I'm
talking to
open
you.
to that. Yeah, nice to talk to you too, Philip. All right. All right. So let's talk again, perhaps. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, my pleasure. Take care. Have a great day.
Bye.